All right, you ready to go with your donkey? You got your animals all set? All right, here we go.
Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome back to the Med Gym for another Technique Tuesday. You may have noticed I have no shoes on today, and that's because we're going to be talking about feet. So let's get right into it. Whether you've thought about it before or not, your feet really are the foundation for every exercise that you do in the gym, whether that's a squat, a deadlift, a lunge, or any kind of exercise, whether it's a lower body strength exercise or a upper body exercise, say an overhead press on your feet. Your feet have to be a stable foundation to have a good base of support and good alignment up the chain. If you think about it, the way the foot really acts is a kind of a guide for the rest of the body. Everything is built off of that. So, for example, if someone has a problem with pronation of their foot, they don't have a good arch, they have a flat foot, they tend to roll in this way, and that takes, as I flatten my foot out and pronate it, that takes my knee right along with it. So someone who doesn't have a good base of support from the foot, say they have a flat foot or they just don't really create an arch very well, is going to automatically have that knee rolled in when they're doing any kind of strength exercise. And so one thing that we want to educate folks on and make sure that you're aware of as you're going through any kind of strength exercise is how to create and maintain a good base of support from your foot all the way up. And so one of the ways I like to talk about this and have clients picture this as is a tripod foot. In other words, you have 3 points of contact on your foot that you really should have the weight evenly distributed upon. So you don't want to be too much up on the ball of your foot. You don't want to be too much back on the heel. You want to have the weight evenly distributed from the heel, the ball of the big toe, and the ball of the little toe. So those 3 points of contact, if you think about getting into any kind of stance, whether it's a squat stance, a lunge, a stance to do an overhead press, if you feel those 3 points of contact evenly distributed on the ground, there's a good chance you're going to be in a stable position to do the exercise up from there. And if you feel like you're not on the heel as much, you're way too up on the toes, or vice versa, you're back on the heel, or you're rolled out, you're rolled in, you're not in a good foundation to do that exercise. In the last Technique Tuesday video that I filmed, we talked about the importance of maintaining knee alignment during the squatting exercise. And so I talked about not allowing that knee valgus, knee inward collapse as you go through a squat. And in that video, I really highlighted the importance of the hip strength, the hip stability, and the awareness of pressing the knees out as you go into a squat. And so that's half of the equation, being able to recruit the hips and those hip stabilizers to stabilize the knees during a lower body exercise. But the other half that I didn't talk about in that video is the importance of the feet in maintaining a solid foundation, a good base of support, and creating that tripod foot to be able to give your knees, your hips, and even your back a good foundation to do any kind of lower body exercise on. So if we talk about the squat from that perspective, getting into a tripod foot, the weight evenly distributed between the ball of your big toe, the ball of your little toe, and the heel of the foot, not being too much forward, not too much back, and not rolled in too much, we're going to be able to keep that stable foundation as we go through a squat exercise. So I'm not rolling in, I'm keeping the tripod foot, and it's a nice stable base of support to squat on. A deadlift is another great lower body exercise, and the same rule applies here. So we don't usually have as much concern with the knee valgus collapse during a deadlift as we do with a squat. It's just not as big of a knee range of motion. But what we do tend to see is just a lack of stability from the foot, and that results in not having as much strength, a good solid foundation to be able to drive as much load up off the ground. And it also affects the lower back and the spine position. As soon as you pronate, you roll those knees in, you roll the hips in, and all of a sudden you're going to be more prone to be in a rounded back position when you're deadlifting. So as we set up for a deadlift, it's not only important to think about where your back is, make sure you're not too round it or too extend it, but it's also important to make sure you're aware of the foot position and creating that tripod foot. So as I set up for a deadlift, if I get too much into pronation, too much of a flat foot position, my knees are rolling in just even a little bit, I'm going to be in a much less stable position to pull that bar off the ground from. If I take a second, get lined up, think about evenly distributed foot, that tripod foot, feeling the whole foot on the ground, not just up on the ball of the foot or on the inner half. Now I can go ahead and get the bar, maintain a good stable base of support for deadlifting. Now, you might be tempted to think that a lower body strength exercise is the only place where it matters how your foot is. And in fact, that's not the case. It actually translates into upper body strength training as well, especially when you're doing an upper body strength exercise on your feet. I mentioned just a minute ago with the deadlift that when you're in a pronated position at the foot, you got flat feet, you're rolling in, that it actually is going to put you in a more of a rounded back position, or at least being more prone to rounding your back during a deadlift. And that's because the foot really is the foundation for everything up the chain. So when we're in a rolled in position, that's going to affect your knees. It's going to roll them into internal rotation. It's going to put your hips in an internally rotated position, which is then going to pull you into a little bit more of a tilted pelvic position. And then that affects where your back's at. And you can demonstrate this to yourself really by just trying to do a overhead reach with your arms. So do it as you normally would, just standing nice and tall, raise the arms overhead, and then really pronate those feet in hard, lift the little toe off the ground, and try to reach again. It's not going to be a huge difference, but you're going to notice that it's a little harder to get those arms overhead. So the stable foot really matters when we go into something like an overhead press. Getting into that tripod foot, a solid base of foundation, and pressing from there is going to give me a lot better chance at getting the arms overhead without getting into a poor posture, rolling forward, and having to fight against that to get the arms overhead. So super important to create that tripod foot, whether it's in a lower body strength exercise or an upper body strength exercise that's done on your feet. Creating that tripod foot, the weight distributed between the ball of your big toe, the ball of your little toe, and the heel is going to be the foundation for good posture and for good strength when you're training in the gym. So keep that in mind. Make sure whatever exercise you're doing, you're aware of feeling the whole foot on the ground. You're not getting too much on the toe. You're not getting rolled in or pronated, and you're not getting back on the heel too far. You got a good base of support. You got that tripod foot, and that's going to set you up for strength training success.